when I was finally diagnosed, my doctor's kind of response was like, well, I didn't test for it because I thought you were too young for developing hypothyroidism. And you can develop it at any age. You can have it congenitally from birth. But I had all those typical symptoms. And had I known more about that it was a very common condition for women, it probably would have been on my radar and I would have pushed for the right testing.
Welcome to Pathways to Purpose, Stories from the Freedom Collective, where we journey alongside remarkable women who have dared to follow that little internal voice and create a life that's in alignment with who they truly are. If you're at a place in your life where you're asking yourself, what's next? Who am I? And what do I really want? Go to IamTheFreedomCollective.com and grab yourself the video series, The Power Within. This resource, it's free right now because I want to help empower as many women as I can. It'll give you 7 keys that were never taught in school or university, so you can gain a new level of clarity and start creating a life and work that reflects who you truly are. Now, I'm excited. Let's get into this incredible story. I'm thrilled to welcome a trailblazer in the field of nutritional therapy, specializing in the recovery of Hashimoto's and hypothyroid conditions for women. Our guest's journey has not just been about personal triumph over chronic illness, but it's also been a fight against systemic challenges within the medical community. She's faced resistance and even gaslighting from medical professionals and had to navigate a path filled with obstacles that many people would find just absolutely insurmountable. Using her background in biomedical science, relentless research, self-experimentation, and eventually pursuing studies in nutrition, she not only reclaimed her health, but also launched a mission to empower other women facing similar struggles. Helen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you speak about your journey with Hashimoto's and hyperthyroidism, a word that I find very difficult to get out sometimes. Can you start off by sharing with us a little bit about this condition for those of us that haven't experienced it and may need to pay attention to things that are going on in our bodies? What is Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism?
Okay, so Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition. Your immune system mistakenly mounts an attack against your thyroid. Hyperthyroidism tends to be the result of Hashimoto's. I would say for 90% of people who have hyperthyroidism, Hashimoto's is the cause. Yet probably most of them aren't aware that they have Hashimoto's. It hasn't been tested for, they haven't been diagnosed with it. And there is a lot you can do with diet and lifestyle to improve the Hashimoto side if you know you've got that. Probably some of the most common symptoms for hyperthyroidism would be the chronic fatigue, struggling to get through your day is quite typical. Brain fog that can be quite debilitating. Weight gain can be another one. It's hypothyroidism slows your metabolism down. So again, that's obviously slowing that energy production down. It's slowing kind of your digestive process down, which can cause digestive symptoms. So a lot of bloating, cramping. A lot of people suffer with constipation, maybe reflux. There's quite a lot of symptoms. One of the ones clients complain about a lot is not being able to regulate their temperature. The thyroid helps regulate your temperature. So having permanently cold hands and feet, even when it's baking outside, is quite common. And then having those hot flushes, as you would maybe if you were at menopause. I found that I had quite severe hot flushes when I had the hypothyroidism and it wasn't being treated optimally. I could go from being freezing cold to being absolutely baking in seconds. It was quite unpleasant.
So when you started experiencing those things, is that when you went to the doctor?
Yeah, I'd been going backwards and forwards for quite a number of years. I'd been diagnosed with celiac disease, and that was it took about 6 years to get that diagnosis. And yeah, it's quite a long time. and that's quite typical
Yeah.
for it to take
Okay.
that long to get the autoimmune disease diagnosed. I had abnormal thyroid tests at that point, and I was followed up a
Okay.
few weeks later with a repeat test, and that came back normal. I didn't know at that time, but that's very typical of Hashimoto's in the early stages. Your thyroid hormones can swing in and out of range. Um, the antibodies for the Hashimoto's were not tested at that point, and then they didn't test for another 8 years. And throughout that entire time, I was just getting worse and worse and worse. My quality of life was pretty poor by the end of that point. It was quite a long process.
Yeah, that's massive. So many of those symptoms sound like things that we could just so easily write off and just so easily go, oh, I've just got a busy lifestyle. I have kids, I'm working, I'm doing all these things. Of course, I'm tired, of course, and just write them off. Looking back on your journey, are there marker points that now, with the wisdom and hindsight, you can go, oh, yeah, I should have paid more attention there, or that should have been something to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, Hashimoto's is the number one kind of autoimmune disease diagnosed. It predominantly affects women, as does hypothyroidism. Yet most people aren't aware of it. It's not on your radar to kind of even think of those symptoms. And when
Right.
I was finally diagnosed, my doctor's kind of response was like, "Well, I didn't test for it because I thought you were too young for developing hypothyroidism. And you can develop it at any age. You can have it congenitally from birth, and it is being diagnosed
Wow.
earlier and earlier now. But I had all those typical
Okay.
symptoms, and had I known more about that it was a very common condition for women, it probably would have been on my radar, and I would have pushed for the right testing.
Can you tell us a little bit about that journey with the medical profession? You talk about a huge amount of resistance, you talk about gaslighting. Take us on that journey. What happened for you?
It was a very stressful journey. There were times that I went to the doctors and I was told
Mhm.
that it was all in my head, that there was nothing wrong with me. I now have four diagnosed like autoimmune conditions, and prior to each diagnosis, I was told that basically I was anxious, I was stressed, I was depressed. There was nothing wrong with me. I was imagining it. I was offered antidepressants prior to each diagnosis, which at that point I would say I probably was depressed at that point because of the
Yep.
experience that I was having with constantly feeling ill and not
Hmm.
being believed. And
Yeah.
living like that every day is extremely traumatic. And then obviously I turned the antidepressants down because I felt that although I probably would have benefited from the antidepressant, I didn't feel that was the issue. I knew there was something more, that it wasn't just depression. The physical symptoms that I was having, I knew there was something behind that. And I felt that if I took the antidepressants, it would be the end of the story. The questions would stop being asked, investigations would stop happening, and it would just be all put down to the depression. So I really, really pushed for kind of further testing. And I will say that my relationship with my doctor now is very good, but it was not at that point. It was very contentious. I hated going to the doctors. I only went if I absolutely had to, when I was to the point that I was really, really struggling. And I
Hmm.
would work myself up before I went in because I knew I was going to have to battle to get what I wanted and to be listened to. I've been One particular specialist laughed at me when I kind of said I was going to continue with the treatment for my B12 deficiency. She out and out said that I didn't have it, even though my results showed that I did. I had all the symptoms. Started a trial medication, and it had made a massive difference. And she just said, "You don't have it." It was there in black and white, and she just said, because I don't have the anemia side of it, that I could not possibly be B12 deficient. And anemia is an end stage symptom of B12 deficiency. And the ignorance and the arrogance of that doctor, the previous session I'd had with her, I left in tears. And I had got to the point I said to my husband, I'm not pushing anymore. I'm not fighting. I'm not researching. I'm just going to do what they said because I can't keep doing this. And it was at that point that he said, no, I live with you. I can see how this is affecting you. I can see how ill you are. She's wrong. And I think it was difference between 6 weeks between those two appointments. At the next one, I'd had 6 weeks of treatment, and I was feeling very different. And I left that appointment, and when she laughed in my face as I was leaving, I was just like, yeah, I was like, okay, I won't be coming back here. So,
And so, just so that I understand, when you're talking about 6 weeks between appointments,
mhm.
was the point where she laughed in your face, was that the second appointment
Yes. Yeah, the first
after
appointment I wasn't, yeah, the first appointment I hadn't been treated for the B12 deficiency. I could barely speak to
okay.
her. I had severe brain fog and speech issues. I would slur my words. I struggled to get the right words in English, and I was doing the appointment in French. She belittled me for the lack of French, and I kept trying to explain it's not the lack of French. I have the French. I just can't get the words out, and I can't do that in English, let alone in French. So obviously I was getting more and more stressed about the appointment, and I could see how she would say that it was all down to stress because I was getting extremely stressed, but she wasn't listening.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, my local GP had trialed the injections between the appointments, and I think I'd had 2 injections by the time I went back. I was able to do the entire appointment in French without kind of
Yeah.
getting all stressed and kind of anxious and upset. I was able to reason through, and she just wouldn't. She'd obviously already got that idea in her head that it was just stress and anxiety, and that there was nothing wrong with me. I mean, she'd even told me that my previous diagnosis I didn't have, and I was like, I already have the diagnosis and the results for the celiac disease and for the Hashimoto's. How can you sit here and tell me that I don't have that
Yeah.
when I've seen other
Yeah.
specialists in those areas who have diagnosed that and the treatment's made a difference? How can you say that to me? I think had I been having that conversation in my native language in a country that kind of I'm used to the system in, I would have made a huge complaint. But I think because of the state of my health at that point and the fact that I was doing it all in French and trying to recover my health, adding on top of that trying to complain in French, I left it. But I still think to this day, I wonder how many people that aren't being treated that should be being treated because of her arrogance and lack of knowledge in that area.
Helen, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that and retelling this story. I just really want to acknowledge your vulnerability and courage to retell that story and share your experience, because doing that, I think, has the power to transform someone else's life. And sometimes all we need is that one person. You mentioned your husband who was saying, well, no, I live with you. I see how you're doing. I know that you're not in a good place. And having that one person to just stand by you and lift you up is sometimes all that you need
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
build up that courage, just take one more step. And I really believe by you continuing to share your journey and do the work that you do now supports people in that place and helps to really give them that support place to take another step and to build hope,
Yeah.
to build
Oh,
hope.
I would say with a lot of my clients, I've had similar experiences when I speak to them, and the first session I have with them, usually the biggest comment I get back is it's the first time I feel like I've been listened to and that somebody understands. And
Yeah.
that for me is huge because like you say, I know what it feels like not to have that,
Yeah.
not to have the kind of support and the understanding. Obviously, my husband was amazing, but the medical system
Yeah.
really did. I think the medical system, don't get me wrong, are amazing when it comes to acute health, but when it comes to chronic health, I think they're just being buried under the sheer weight of the epidemic of chronic health issues at the moment, and it's just not set
Yeah.
up to deal with that.
Yeah. A few key pieces that are standing out to me as you're sharing are: one, paying attention to that little internal voice that's telling you things aren't quite right. And to follow that and continue to have the courage and to find the support system around you that you need to keep pursuing that, because there is that, we all have that little internal guidance system helping us to navigate. So I think that that is really, really powerful. Also, I want to fill in a couple of gaps for some of our listeners. So you were talking about having to do these appointments in 2 different languages. So
Yeah.
you sound like you have an English accent. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Are you English and now live in France? What's been your story?
Yeah, so I am English, originally from South Yorkshire in England. I moved over to France permanently about 15, well, maybe a bit longer than that now, probably 20 years ago, actually. We came over here to work seasonally. My husband's a chef. He works as a private chef in like the luxury chalets. So I worked with him as a hostess and concierge initially when we came over here, and then I also worked as a private chef from what I'd learnt from him. So I like to bring that side of it into my nutritional therapy as well, the kind of obviously the recipe writing, the meal planning from the chefing side of things, and to make food taste great. So we've travelled probably quite a bit around Europe, and worked in various countries, so Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Greece. Yeah, basically working private chef, and I loved doing what I did, but it really did not help my health at all. The hours were long, it was split
Right.
shifts. It was a lot. I think when we first arrived in France, we'd be working the morning shift, we'd be out skiing in the afternoon, we'd then be working the evening shift and then going out and meeting friends for drinks in the evening. Very little time for sleep, very little time for like recovery and kind of recuperation. And I definitely think that contributed towards my health issues, the lifestyle I was living. One of the reasons we left the UK was my job was extremely kind of pressurized, long hours,
Okay.
irregular shifts,
Yeah.
working in the pharmaceutical industry. I didn't really get the time off. I was being called on my holiday time, being called in on my time off. So my health at that point, I'd already been diagnosed with a celiac disease and it wasn't in a great place. And that was one of the ideas behind moving and kind of
Okay.
working over here for a different pace of life. But again, I went at it quite full on and it probably really did not help. So yeah,
So now
sorry.
you're in the French Alps.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Yeah, cool. Okay. So moved to France, started doing different things to support your lifestyle. However, you were still burning the candle at both ends, trying to squeeze as much life in as possible.
Yeah.
Then you navigated through all of the health challenges, and that was quite a significant journey. Where are you at health-wise now?
Health-wise, I'm pretty good now. I'm just starting to hit perimenopause, so there's a few little tweaks I'm having to make, a few little symptoms that are cropping up that I'm having to address. But compared to where I was before, it's like night and day. I actually can get on with my life and lead a normal life, which was pretty much impossible prior.
Wow. I love that there's hope. That's really powerful. I have so many questions just running through my mind that I want to ask you. In terms of the work that you do now, you work with women navigating a similar journey to the journey that you've walked. What is it that you do for work, and how do you help women with Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions?
Okay, so I work as a nutritional therapist, and so that doesn't
Okay.
just involve the diet, that involves all the lifestyle factors that may be contributing to illness. And the idea behind it is to dig down and find out what is driving the symptoms, what is kind of underpinning
Okay.
everything. So if you think of it
Yeah.
like a big jigsaw puzzle, I collect all the information from food diaries, from health questionnaires, from my clients, and then start to put the picture together, put a timeline together of when things have happened. Maybe traumatic
Yeah.
events have kind of triggered some of the illness, and obviously you can't
Okay.
reverse that, but you can address the trauma. you can
Yeah.
look at kind of what's keeping that inflammation going, because that inflammatory response tends to be what's driving that autoimmune side of things. So are we looking at foods that may be triggering that? Are we looking at nutrients that are missing that kind of means that your body can't function as it should be, and that's what's driving some of the symptoms? So basically unpicking everything and working out where that focus needs to be, which systems are struggling, which systems need the support. So quite often the gut is a major area that needs addressing. That intestinal permeability, so leaky gut, has been associated with being one of the triggers for autoimmune conditions. So gut health is a huge part of most of my clients' recovery, regardless of if they've got gut symptoms. If you've got an unhealthy balance in your gut bacteria, it affects your immune regulation, it affects your brain function, it affects kind of your liver, your adrenals, your sleep, it affects all different areas. So that tends to be a key area. And like the chronic pain that tends to come along with autoimmune conditions, like joint pain, muscle pain, that tends to come from that leaky gut side of things that's causing that systemic inflammation and is resulting in pain. So addressing that gut tends to resolve a lot of those symptoms, and then putting the support in for the other areas that need it.
How do you test gut health?
So I don't always test gut health. It depends on the client. Quite often, just making the changes of removing those inflammatory foods, addressing some of those lifestyle factors that are driving that inflammation, maybe removing toxins in the environment. So women tend to use a lot of products, and a lot of them are full of endocrine disruptors. The thyroid is part of your endocrine system, so your hormone system. If you're overloaded with those toxins, it can basically have a negative impact on your hormone health. So looking at those kind of things is really, really important. And quite often, once you've addressed those, the gut tends to balance itself. You can put supplements in there to help. If I'm noticing that those changes aren't happening at the rate that I expect them to happen, then I look at gut testing, and I would look at a comprehensive stool analysis. It measures kind of the balance of bacteria in your gut, the opportunistic bacteria, parasites. It'll look for inflammatory markers, immune markers, to see what's going on. Those gut bacteria regulate that immune system. They talk to your immune system. They talk to your brain they're involved heavily.
That's so fascinating. And I think this is a really important piece, because whether you have Hashimoto's, a thyroid condition, or just general health, it sounds like gut health and making sure that everything in that system is working well is super, super important for all of us. So for those of us that might not know what some of those inflammatory things are, you mentioned foods, you mentioned external stresses, you mentioned chemicals, the stuff we put on our skin. Can you
Yeah.
just talk us through some of those things so that we can just start to flag in our mind what specific things, if I look around my health, if I look through my pantry,
Yeah.
what are some of the big things that tend to cause inflammation that I can start to maybe remove before I'm even dealing with some sort of health issue?
Okay, so the biggest inflammatory foods that I would say that I get my clients to avoid are sugar. It is a hugely inflammatory food. It feeds the bad bacteria, if you like, in your gut, and allows them to get out of balance. And then they start to release those inflammatory kind of molecules. So you want to avoid feeding the bad bacteria if you can. You want to be feeding the good guys, and kind of not feeding the bad guys. So
Okay.
sugar is one of those. White refined
Is that all?
carbohydrates.
Is that all sugar? Is that
Um,
all sugar? Is it refined sugar? Is it honey? Is it like,
so all
could you break
sugar
that? Can you
is
break that one down?
all sugar is inflammatory. So, but it depends. So definitely refined sugar, and added sugar, I would avoid completely. Um,
Okay.
I would look at fruit is fine. You've got the fiber in there, you've got the nutrients in there. That fiber is going to slow the blood sugar spikes down, and it's going to reduce the effect of that inflammatory effect that sugar has. So fruit is amazing. I would not say cut the fruit out, but you need to be eating it with things that balance that inflammatory kind of blood sugar spike. So protein is a great one.
Okay.
Um, and then things like honey, molasses, maple syrup, so your natural kind of sugars, they do have nutrients in them, so they do have health benefits. Unlike white table sugar, has no health benefits. It has no nutrients that you actually need. So I will have a little bit of those in my diet, but not very often. I am quite strict because my health was in such a bad place, and it had gone on for so long that I needed to be at that level to basically
Mm-hmm.
maintain that recovery phase that I'm in. If
Yeah.
I slip with those habits, I do notice it. I will start to notice I start to feel more sluggish, more brain foggy. I'll start to notice I get more joint pain and things like that. So yes,
Okay.
sugar is a major one. White refined carbohydrates. So anything made from white flour, the fiber, the outer husk of that, the kind of wheat has been removed. So there's no longer the fiber in there. A lot of the nutrients have been removed in that process. So again, in your body, it turns those carbohydrates into sugar. All carbohydrates get turned into sugar internally. So if
Yeah.
they've got the fiber like the fruit, that process is slowed down. If you're having whole grain flours, it's much better than having the white refined flours. So switch to the brown bread,
Okay.
switch to kind of brown wraps, kind of things like that where you can. And the more naturally, the kind of some of the pseudo grains, things like buckwheat, which is actually a seed and not a grain. Quinoa, you can kind of start mixing things up so you're not just relying on the kind of white refined carbs, things like the rice, things like the white pasta, things like that all the time. And then
So good.
processed foods is another one because they have so many sugars in them. They have so many refined ingredients in them. They have emulsifiers in, which have been shown to cause a leaky gut. They have kind of a lot of the additives in again, which have been shown to cause that leaky gut. So you don't want to be taking the things out that are causing the leaky gut and then be eating those kind of foods. So, for example, with clients with autoimmune conditions, especially Hashimoto's, I would take the gluten and the dairy out of there. They drive that leaky gut. So, if you're taking those out of there and then replacing them with the processed gluten-free products, you're replacing with products that do the same thing as the gluten is doing. So I didn't realize this when I went gluten free. I would say the choice for gluten free products wasn't huge when I was diagnosed, so I didn't have that much of
Mm-hmm.
it. But probably later on, as they improved, I did start to have more, and I didn't realize that all those ingredients in there were probably doing probably not as much damage, but was certainly not helping the matter, and we're driving that leaky gut, which I was trying to get under control.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Thank you for sharing those little pieces because I find it so helpful to be able to go, okay, so these are some of the things that I can be paying attention to now,
Yeah,
right? So I love that. And so your journey into this this health space, you said you were already in pharmaceuticals. This has kind of been your background.
yeah,
You've done the work as a chef, so that kind of naturally lends itself to the work that you currently do with helping people with all the different aspects of dealing with a chronic health condition. Would you say now that you're doing the work that you do, yes, it was driven by your experiences, but do you feel like it's in alignment with your purpose?
yeah. I finally feel like I'm doing what I should have been doing. I absolutely love what I do. I get such a buzz out of seeing my clients improve their health from kind of recognizing in that first session that they're really struggling, and then by the first and second follow ups, there's usually quite a dramatic change between those sessions, and look and
Yeah.
seeing that hope and that belief that they are going to kind of achieve their health goals and get back to kind of being able to do the things that they love that they've not been able to do for so long. I
Yeah.
really, really enjoy what I do now.
Yeah. When you said, I feel like I'm finally doing what I was always supposed to be doing, when you look back on your journey and it started in, it's pharmaceuticals and
Yeah.
in that space, is that right?
Yeah, I worked for two large pharmaceutical companies in their incoming materials testing laboratories. So for a company that manufactured equipment for diabetic testing, and then kind of another company that worked for that basically looked at wound healing. So we were looking at dressings and things like that. So the laboratory I was in was testing those raw materials to make sure that they were fit to be used in manufacturing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Is the common thread, I'm just seeing so many common threads in your story, and I think that that happens for all of us as we're trying to navigate life. We're trying to find our purpose, find the thing that we're designed to do. It sounds like there was always this thread of wanting to help people. What would you define that thread as for yourself?
Um, I suppose I'm quite curious. I like to know how things work, why things happen the way they do. So I suppose that comes in with the science things and the research.
Yeah.
But yeah, the same now of when I get that picture, that first overall picture with the client of what is going on, what's driving this, kind of picking it apart and kind of yeah, that I would say is my common thread. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
say that I'm maybe working in hospitality, probably wasn't my natural area when I was doing the chefing. But yeah, I do like that area that I feel like I'm contributing, that I'm helping in some way or other.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Were there any hurdles for you transitioning into the work that you do now? Was there any reservations, any fears, or was it like, no, this is easily what I'm supposed to be doing, and you just jumped in with gusto?
Definitely there was fears and reservations before I started studying the nutrition.
Okay.
I was not, I had done some work with a nutritional therapist and had started to recover a decent amount of my health, but I was still having to manage it
Yeah.
quite heavily. And I was really quite concerned of whether I would actually be able to do the studying, keep up with the studying, that because of the fatigue that I experienced, because of the brain fog. My memory was quite poor. Would I be able to kind of remember things for tests and things like that? So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, there was quite a lot of mulling over before I actually committed. And I have a friend who lives locally who really pushed me towards it. She said, "I think you're going to be fantastic." And originally, I did it for recovering my own health. I didn't intend to use it as practicing. It was the first initial
Mhm.
year, which was nutrition and health coaching. I intended to do just purely to get back on top of my own health. And it was only probably
Wow.
about 3 or 4 months in when I really had got back on top of it that I thought, I want to continue the studying. I want to know more. I want to learn more. I want to be able to dig deeper, do the testing, work with clients on that side of things, and not just do the coaching. I do bring that into my practice. But yeah, I wanted to be able to do the nutritional therapy side of things. And that's at the kind of halfway through that first year program was when I probably thought, actually, I want to do, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Wow. Two times in your story, you've mentioned that there was a person in your world. The first time was your husband, second time was your friend,
Yeah,
that really bolstered your belief, your self belief, and your courage to keep moving forward.
yeah,
One with your health condition, your husband, and your health condition saying, no, you're not crazy. There's something going on for you. And then your friend saying, I think you're going to be excellent at this.
yeah.
And then you decided, it was just, it seemed like that one person was enough to just give you that little piece of courage to keep moving forward. Is that true for you? Is that something that you had recognized in your journey?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very lucky where we live here because we don't live close to family. You don't automatically have that family support kind of every day. We have a
Mm.
very close knit group of friends who are in the same position here, and we all kind of support each other. What another friend had paid for my 40th birthday for me to have the initial nutritional therapy sessions to help me start on that journey. So yeah, I
Yeah.
have a very good close network of friends that have been amazingly supportive. And I think that is really important when that self-doubt does set in and that fear sets in that you can't do this, just having that support there to kind of say,
Yeah.
no, you can do this. Yeah, it's been the difference, I would say. Maybe I would have given up at
Yeah.
times and not pursued if I hadn't had that support.
So I'm thinking about those of us that may not have that close friendship or that support network around us. Do you have a place for people to connect if they don't have that support around them?
Yeah, absolutely. I have
Yeah.
a Facebook group, and it is specifically for
Okay.
those with Hashimoto's, hyperthyroidism, any thyroid condition, to be honest. And the idea is that it's a safe space to go ask questions. No question is stupid. You can ask whatever you want, even if you're just having a bad day and you need to have a rant and you just need somebody to understand where you're coming from. That's what the group's for. Obviously, I share my
Amazing.
experience in there. I share my tips and the first steps that people need to start with that recovery. So I do share a lot of information that is going to be valuable that you can action, but it is also just to have that support, because I know I've been extremely lucky and not everybody is that lucky to have that support. Some of the stories that you hear in kind of not just my group, there are other groups out there, of partners not being supportive and kind of not understanding their illness at all, and that can add to the trauma and kind of add to your symptoms if you're not getting any understanding, any support. It can make things much worse.
Yeah. Well, thank God for you, Helen, honestly. And thank you for the work that you do. I really honor you, and I honor you for sharing your journey and being vulnerable. Like, that is not an easy thing to rehash and to talk over, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share. If you feel like you're at the end of your rope, if you feel like, yeah, there are things going on and no one else seems to understand, please connect with Helen and her group. She has so many fabulous resources. They're all going to be linked below so that you can connect and have that support. If there's something in this conversation that has sparked an interest in you, sparked a thought, inspired you, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to connect and be able to support you however we can. So, Helen, thank you so much for taking the time to share. Do you have any final words for us or thoughts for us as we wrap up today?
Yeah, trust in yourself. If you think something is wrong, don't take no for an answer. Don't just kind of. Doctors know a lot of information. They are well trained, your GP, but they know a little bit about a lot. You are the expert when it comes to your body and what is normal and what is not. If you think something isn't right, don't be pushed aside. Don't be ignored. You will have to kind of stand up for yourself. You will have to have those difficult conversations with your doctors. It's not always pleasant, but you need to be your own health advocate. You need to be, nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to be the one that says, no, I do want that testing, and this is why. And I've done my research. I would like to trial this, and this is why. So yeah, basically, don't be bullied. Don't be kind of pushed to the side. If you think something isn't right, if you're going to an appointment and you feel you're not being heard, take somebody with you. I did it I took my husband. At times, because I noticed the difference in how I was treated when I was on my own compared to when somebody else was in the room. It was completely different. So yeah, don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to say you want to take notes. Ask if you can record the session. If your memory is that bad that you can't remember what's been said to you, ask if you can record the session. When you're going into that session, make sure you've made a bullet points of your symptoms and what test you want and what you were expecting to get out of that session. I do that with my doctor now, and I just hand it over when I go in. He loves it because it makes his job so much easier. He can see, he knows that I've not forgotten half the things because I've come in prepared, whereas when you're not prepared and you have that session, you forget half the symptoms that you've been struggling with. You get out and you think, oh, I should have told him that, I should have told him that, and maybe they're key pieces in that puzzle for him to figure out what, or her, figure out what's going on. So having it presented like that, my doctor now just finds it's so much quicker and easier, and we both get what we want out of the session.
Stunning. Helen, you've given us so many practical things to do. You've given us so many little tidbits to pay attention to, from any of those triggers, those inflammatory things that are all around us every day that we can pay attention to. And you have been vulnerable and shared your story. And I thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us today.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today. If you were inspired by that story, please check out the description below this video, because it will have all of the links that you need to connect with our guest and access their incredible resources. If you're in a place where you're feeling like, yeah, I know that there is something more for me and I want to start taking those next steps, but I'm not quite sure where to start, we have got your back here at the Freedom Collective. So again, in the description below, there are links to an incredible free resource. It's a 7-part video series where I give you 7 keys that we're never taught at school, we're never taught at university. And what these keys will do is they will help to start putting those foundation pieces in place so that you can bring your life into alignment with who you truly are. Your life, your work, your dreams, the things that are resonating at your core. Okay, so check that out. Connect with our guests. They're incredible. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. And we look forward to sharing another story with you again shortly on Pathways to Purpose, Stories from the Freedom Collective.